Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering it could be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's ancient, not because it's gold, but because of a tiny detail most people never notice. Today, we're diving into the story of the 1960 Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance but hides a fascinating story that continues to surprise collectors even today. The 1960 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1960, this coin had already been in circulation for over 50 years, quietly passing from hand to hand across the United States. The D Mint mark tells us that this particular penny was produced at the Denver Mint, one of the key facilities responsible for striking coins for everyday use. At the time, millions of these pennies were made, and they were never intended to be rare or valuable. They were simply tools of daily life, used to buy candy, pay for newspapers, or sit forgotten in jars and drawers. But something interesting happened in 1960 that would change how collectors view this coin forever. That year, the U.S. Mint made a subtle change to the design of the date on the penny. This resulted in two distinct varieties known as the small date and the large date. At first glance, the difference is easy to miss. The numbers look nearly identical unless you know exactly what to look for. But once you see it, the difference becomes clear, and that small detail can dramatically change the coin's value. The large date version has thicker, more evenly spaced numbers, making the date appear bold and easy to read. The small date version, on the other hand, has slimmer numbers, and the zero in 1960 looks more oval-shaped compared to the rounder zero on the large date. This subtle variation happened because of changes in the minting dies used during production. It wasn't planned as a collectible feature, but it became one of the most talked about details among coin enthusiasts. The 1960 small date penny is especially important because it is much rarer than the large date version. While both were produced in large numbers, far fewer small date coins were struck at the Denver Mint. This makes the small date variety significantly more desirable among collectors. And here's the twist that makes it even more interesting. Many people still have these coins without realizing what they own. Now let's talk about the design itself. The front of the coin, known as the obverse, features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces to the right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right, along with the small D Mint mark beneath it. On the reverse side, you'll find the classic wheat ears design, officially called the wheat penny reverse, even though 1960 actually belongs to the Lincoln Memorial reverse era. This is where it gets interesting for new collectors because by 1959, the design had already switched from wheat ears to the Lincoln Memorial. So the 1960 penny features the Lincoln Memorial on the back, with United States of America and 1 cent clearly displayed. The coin is made primarily of copper, with a composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This gives it that rich, reddish-brown color when it's new. Over time, as the coin circulates, it can darken into a brown tone, or develop a mix of red and brown shades depending on how it was stored and handled. Collectors often categorize these coins as red, red-brown, or brown, and the color can significantly affect the coin's value. So why is this penny valuable? The answer comes down to rarity, condition, and variety. The 1960 small date penny is the key player here. In average circulated condition, it might not be worth much more than a few cents. But in higher grades, especially coins that have been preserved in near-perfect condition, the value can rise quickly. Uncirculated examples with strong red color are especially sought after. There have been auction sales where high-grade 1960 small date pennies have sold for hundreds, and in some cases even thousands of dollars, depending on their condition and certification. Coins graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC often command higher prices because their authenticity and condition are verified. A top-grade example with a bright red finish and no visible flaws can attract serious attention from collectors. Even the large date version, while more common, can still hold value in pristine condition. Many collectors aim to complete sets of Lincoln cents, and they look for the best possible examples of each year and variety. This means that even a common coin can become valuable if it is in exceptional shape. Now, how can you tell if you have a real 1960 small date penny? First, you need to carefully examine the date. Look closely at the shape of the numbers, especially the 6 and the 0. On the small date, the 6 appears more delicate, and the 0 is slightly taller and narrower. On the large date, the numbers are thicker and more evenly proportioned. Using a magnifying glass or a smartphone camera with zoom can make this process much easier. Next, check the mint mark. It should be a small d located just below the date. Make sure it looks natural and not altered. Some counterfeiters attempt to add mint marks to coins to make them appear more valuable. A genuine mint mark will have the same texture and wear as the rest of the coin. Weight and material can also help confirm authenticity. A genuine 1960 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If the coin feels unusually light or heavy, it could be a sign that something is off. While counterfeiting pennies is not as common as higher value coins, it still happens, especially when certain varieties become desirable. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. In 1960, the United States was going through a period of economic growth, and coins were being produced in massive quantities to keep up with demand. Yet, despite the high production numbers, small variations like the small date can turn an everyday object into something special. It's a reminder that value isn't always about age or rarity alone, but about the details that make something unique. Another interesting detail is that many collectors didn't notice the small date and large date differences right away. It took time for the numismatic community to recognize and categorize these varieties. This means that for years, these coins circulated freely without anyone paying close attention. Even today, it's possible to find one in an old collection, a coin jar, or even in pocket change, though it's becoming less common as more people become aware of their value. Collectors love the 1960 penny because it represents a perfect mix of accessibility and discovery. It's not an ancient coin locked away in a museum. It's a piece of everyday history that anyone could potentially find. The thrill of spotting a small date variety keeps collectors searching, examining, and learning. It turns a simple hobby into a treasure hunt. There's also something deeply nostalgic about this coin. It comes from a time when pennies still had strong purchasing power, when everyday transactions relied heavily on small change. Holding a 1960 penny is like holding a small piece of that era, a reminder of how much the world has changed. And perhaps the most exciting part is this. Somewhere out there, right now, there are still 1960 small date pennies waiting to be discovered. They might be sitting in a forgotten drawer, tucked inside an old wallet, or mixed in with hundreds of ordinary coins. Most people will never notice them. But for those who know what to look for, that tiny difference in the date can turn an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. So the next time you come across a handful of pennies, take a closer look. Pay attention to the details, because hidden among those coins could be a small piece of history, quietly waiting to reveal its true value. Welcome back. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket change, and realizing it might be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it's gold, not because it's ancient, but because of tiny details most people never notice. Today, we're uncovering the story of a coin that millions have seen, but very few truly understand. The 1962 Lincoln penny. At first glance, the 1962 Lincoln penny looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and carries the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front. This coin was minted in 1962 at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small D mint mark just below the date. Billions of these pennies were produced, which might make you think they're common and not worth much. But as you'll soon discover, there's more to this coin than meets the EYE.to understand this penny. We need to step back into 1962. The United States was in the middle of the Cold War. It was a time of tension, growth, and rapid change. Yet through all of that, everyday life continued, and coins like this were being used for simple purchases. Buying a newspaper, a soda, or a piece of candy. The Lincoln penny itself had already been around for over 50 years at that point, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday. By 1962, the design of the penny had become iconic. On the front, you see Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. It was one of the first U.S. coins to feature a real historical figure. On the back, you'll find 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. This is why coins from this era are often called wheat pennies. However, it's important to note that by 1962, the U.S. had already switched to the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. So the 1962 penny actually features the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, not the wheat ears. This shift in design marked a new era for the penny, symbolizing both tradition and modern America. The coin was made primarily of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This composition gives it that rich reddish-brown color when it's in good condition. Over time, many of these coins darken due to oxidation, turning a deep brown. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Even though millions of 1962 pennies were minted, not all of them are equal. Some have unique characteristics that make them stand out. For example, collectors pay close attention to the coin's condition. A well-preserved coin with its original luster can be worth significantly more than one that's worn down from years of circulation. But condition isn't the only factor. Errors and varieties play a huge role in a coin's value. During the minting process, small mistakes can happen. These mistakes can turn an ordinary coin into something rare and highly collectible. For the 1962 penny, collectors have reported issues like die cracks, off-center strikes, and subtle doubling in the lettering point. One of the most talked about features is the possibility of a repunched mint mark. This happens when the D mint mark was stamped more than once in slightly different positions, creating a shadow-like effect. To the average person, it might look like a flaw. But to a collector, it's a sign of rarity. So why does this matter? Because rarity drives value. While most 1962 pennies are only worth a few cents or maybe $1 in circulated condition, certain examples can sell for much more. Coins in mint state condition, meaning they were never used in everyday transactions, can reach prices of $10, $20, or even higher depending on their grade. In some cases, exceptional coins have sold for over $100, especially if they show strong strike quality and vibrant original color. Red-colored coins, often labeled as RD by grading services, are particularly desirable. These coins have retained their bright copper appearance, making them visually striking and harder to find. There have also been auction listings where high-grade 1962 pennies, certified by professional grading companies, have fetched impressive prices. While these are not million-dollar coins, they represent an exciting opportunity for collectors who enjoy the thrill of finding hidden value in everyday objects. Now you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1962 penny is valuable or just another common coin? The first step is to look at the condition. Check for wear on Lincoln's face, especially around the cheek and jawline. A coin with sharp details and minimal wear is always more desirable. Next, examine the color. If the coin still has a bright, reddish tone, it could be more valuable than one that has turned dark brown. Then take a close look at the mint mark. Is the D clear and well-defined? Does it look doubled or slightly off? These small details can make a big difference. You should also inspect the coin for any unusual features. Look at the lettering, the numbers in the date, and the overall alignment. If something looks off, it might be worth getting the coin checked by a professional. Many collectors use magnifying tools or even digital microscopes to study their coins in detail. Of course, with any collectible item, there's always the risk of counterfeits. While fake pennies are less common than fake gold or silver coins, they do exist. Most counterfeit attempts involve altering the date or mint mark to make a coin appear rarer than it actually is. That's why it's important to compare your coin with verified examples and, if necessary, consult a trusted coin dealer or grading service. Now here's a fun fact that surprises many people. The metal in these older pennies is actually worth more than 1 cent. Because they are made mostly of copper, their intrinsic value can exceed their face value, especially when copper prices are high. However, melting coins for metal is illegal in the United States, so their true value remains in their collectible appeal. Another interesting detail is how many of these coins are still out there. Even today, you might find a 1962 penny hiding in circulation, mixed in with modern coins. Most people wouldn't give it a second glance. But now you know better. You understand that even a small coin like this can carry history, craftsmanship, and potential value. Collectors love the 1962 Lincoln penny because it represents a balance between accessibility and discovery. It's not so rare that it's impossible to find, but it still offers enough variation to keep things exciting. Whether it's searching for a high-grade example, spotting a mint error, or simply appreciating the design, this coin has something for everyone. At IT also serves as a reminder that collecting doesn't have to be expensive. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to start a meaningful collection. Sometimes all it takes is a careful eye and a bit of curiosity. Coins like the 1962 D penny prove that value can be hidden in the most ordinary places. And perhaps that's the real beauty of it. This small piece of copper has traveled through decades of history. It may have passed through countless hands, been used in everyday transactions, or sat forgotten in a jar. Yet today, it still has a story to tell. So the next time you come across a penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the date. Look for that small D mint mark. Because you never know, that ordinary coin in your hand might be more than just spare change. And as we continue to explore the fascinating world of rare and valuable coins, remember this. Sometimes the smallest discoveries lead to the biggest surprises. What if the small, ordinary penny sitting in your pocket right now isn't so ordinary after all? What if a simple 1975 Lincoln penny, the kind most people ignore, could quietly hold a story that reaches back through American history, and in some cases, even carry surprising value? The 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is one of those coins that almost everyone has seen, yet very few people truly understand. At first glance, it looks like just another copper-colored cent, worn from decades of use. But behind that simple appearance lies a fascinating story of history, design, and the subtle details that collectors watch for very closely. To understand this coin, we have to go back to the year 1975. The United States was going through a period of economic challenges, including inflation and rising production costs. Despite these changes, the Lincoln cent remained one of the most widely produced coins in the country. Millions upon millions were minted that year, primarily in Philadelphia and Denver. When a coin has no mint mark, like the 1975 penny we're talking about, it means it was made in Philadelphia. At that time, the Philadelphia Mint did not use a mint mark on pennies. So, a 1975 penny without a letter under the date isn't missing anything. It's exactly how it was meant to be. This coin continues a design that had already been in use for decades. On the front, you'll see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, facing right. This design was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate Lincoln's 100th birthday. It was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it became one of the most recognizable images in American coin history. Above Lincoln's head, you'll see the word Liberty. To the right of his portrait is the date, 1975. And just above that, you'll find the phrase, "In God we trust." These elements are simple, but they carry deep historical meaning. Now turn the coin over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears design is no longer there. By 1975, the reverse had already changed to the Lincoln Memorial, which was introduced in 1959. This design shows the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., with the words United States of America above it and 1 cent below. If you look closely, you can even spot a tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. The metal composition of the 1975 penny is also important. These coins are made mostly of copper, about 95%, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc. This gives the coin its distinctive reddish-brown color, although over time, many of these pennies darken or develop a brown tone due to oxidation. Now here's where things get interesting. At first glance, the 1975 no-mint mark penny might seem extremely common. After all, billions were produced. But in the world of coin collecting, value doesn't always come from low mintage. Sometimes it comes from condition, and sometimes it comes from errors. A standard 1975 penny in circulated condition is usually worth only a few cents. But if you happen to find one in uncirculated condition, meaning it has never been used and still retains its original shine, the value can rise significantly. Collectors are always searching for coins that look as close as possible to the day they were minted. Even more exciting are error coins. These are coins that were struck with some kind of mistake during the minting process. For the 1975 penny, there are a few known error types that collectors pay close attention to. These include double die errors, where the design appears slightly doubled, and off-center strikes, where the coin's image is not properly aligned. There are also cases of coins with clipped planchets, meaning a piece of the coin is missing due to a cutting error during production. While these mistakes might sound like flaws in the world of coin collecting, they can actually make a coin much more valuable. In fact, some high-quality 1975 pennies with noticeable errors have sold for impressive amounts at auction. While a normal example might only be worth a few cents, an uncirculated coin with a strong strike and bright red color could sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on grading. Coins graded by professional services, such as those in mint state 65 or higher, can command higher prices. And if a rare error is involved, the value can jump into the hundreds. It all depends on the uniqueness and condition of the coin. So how can you tell if your 1975 penny is worth something more than face value? The first step is to examine the coin carefully. Look at the surface. Is it worn, or does it still have a shiny, almost new appearance? Coins with a bright red tone are generally more valuable than those that have turned brown over time. Next, check for any unusual features. Do the letters look doubled? Is the design off-center? Are there any cracks or missing sections? These small details can make a big difference. It's also important to weigh the coin if possible. A standard 1975 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If the weight is significantly different, it could indicate an error or even a counterfeit. Speaking of counterfeits, while the 1975 penny isn't one of the most commonly faked coins, it's still important to be cautious. Always compare your coin to verified examples. Look closely at the details of Lincoln's face, the lettering, and the overall quality. Counterfeit coins often lack the sharpness and precision of genuine mint products. If you believe you have a valuable coin, consider having it professionally graded. This not only confirms its authenticity but also gives it a condition rating that collectors trust. Here's a fun fact that many people don't realize. Even though the 1975 penny is common, it still represents a piece of everyday American life from nearly 50 years ago. These coins passed through countless hands, bought small items, and were part of daily transactions across the country. Another interesting detail is that coins from this era are part of the last generation of primarily copper pennies. Just a few years later, in 1982, the composition would change to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. This makes earlier pennies, like the 1975 version, especially interesting to collectors who prefer the older metal composition. Collectors love the 1975 no-mint mark penny not because it is rare in the traditional sense, but because it offers opportunity. It's a coin that almost anyone can find, yet it still holds the potential for discovery. Whether it's a high-grade example, a unique error, or simply a well-preserved piece of history, each coin tells its own story. There's also something exciting about searching through everyday change and realizing that something valuable could be hiding in plain sight. It turns an ordinary activity into a treasure hunt. And that's really what coin collecting is all about. It's not just about money. It's about history, curiosity, and the thrill of finding something unexpected. So the next time you come across a 1975 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't just toss it aside. Take a closer look. Hold it in your hand and think about where it's been, how many people have used it, and what secrets it might still hold. Because sometimes, the smallest and most overlooked objects can carry the biggest stories. And who knows? The next coin you check might just surprise you. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now is more than just 1 cent? What if it's a small piece of American history with a story most people never notice? Today, we're taking a closer look at the 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have seen, but very few truly understand. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. It's small, brown or copper-colored, and features a familiar face. But hidden inside this everyday coin is a story of American craftsmanship, history, and in some cases, surprising value. The 1978 Lincoln penny is part of one of the longest-running coin series in United States history. First introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln, this design marked the first time a real person appeared on a U.S. circulating coin. By 1978, the Lincoln penny had already been in use for nearly 70 years, becoming one of the most recognizable coins in the country. Now, when we talk about a 1978 penny with no mint mark, we are specifically referring to coins that were produced in Philadelphia. At that time, the Philadelphia Mint did not include a mint mark on pennies. So, unlike coins from Denver or San Francisco, which would have a small D or S, these coins appear blank under the date. That missing mark is not an error. It is completely normal, but it often confuses beginners who assume something is wrong or rare. To understand this coin better, we need to step back into the late 1970s. America was going through a time of economic challenges, including inflation and rising costs of living. Despite these changes, the penny remained an important part of everyday transactions. Billions of pennies were produced each year to keep up with demand. In fact, in 1978 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 5.5 billion Lincoln cents. That's billions of coins entering circulation, making this one of the most common pennies ever made. But even among billions, not all coins are equal. The design of the 1978 Lincoln penny remained consistent with earlier versions. On the front, you see the profile of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. His initials, VDB, are located at the bottom of the reverse side, though they are small and often overlooked. Around Lincoln's portrait, the words "In God We Trust" appear above, liberty is placed to the left, and the date, 1978, sits on the right. On the back, you'll find the classic wheat-free design introduced in 1959, known as the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. It shows the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., and if you look closely, you can even spot a tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside. This level of detail on such a small coin is something many people never notice. The coin itself is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This gives it that warm reddish-brown color when new, although over time, exposure to air and handling can turn it darker. Collectors often categorize these coins by color, calling them red, red-brown, or brown, depending on how much of the original shine remains. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Even though the 1978 no-mint mark penny is extremely common, certain versions of it can be worth much more than 1 cent. The value depends heavily on condition and on rare errors that may have occurred during the minting process. Coins that have never been used, known as uncirculated coins, can be worth significantly more than face value. A bright red 1978 penny in near-perfect condition might sell for several dollars, sometimes even more if graded highly by professional services. While that might not sound like a fortune, it's a big jump from just 1 cent, but the real excitement comes from mint errors. During the coin production process, mistakes can happen. These mistakes are not supposed to occur, which is exactly why collectors find them so fascinating. Some 1978 pennies show doubling on the letters or numbers, known as double die errors. This means parts of the design appear slightly duplicated, as if there's a shadow effect. These coins can be worth much more depending on how clear the doubling is. Another type of error is an off-center strike, where the coin was not properly aligned during minting. This results in part of the design being cut off. The more dramatic the misalignment, the more valuable the coin can be. There are also cases of coins struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the metal blank used was intended for a different coin. These are extremely rare and can fetch high prices among serious collectors. Some collectors have reported selling high-grade 1978 Lincoln pennies for $50, $100, or even more, especially if the coin is in pristine condition or has a noticeable error. While these are not everyday finds, they do exist, and they continue to fuel interest in what might otherwise seem like an ordinary coin. So how can you tell if your 1978 penny is worth more than 1 cent? First, take a close look at the condition. Is the coin shiny and bright or worn and scratched? Coins with fewer marks and more original color are generally more valuable. Next, check for any unusual features. Look closely at the date and lettering. Do you see any doubling or strange shapes? Is the design centered properly? Using a magnifying glass can help reveal details that are not visible to the naked eye. Many collectors also use digital microscopes or coin loops for a closer inspection. It's also important to be aware of cleaning. Some people try to clean coins to make them look better, but this can actually reduce their value. A cleaned coin often loses its natural surface and may appear dull or unnatural. Serious collectors prefer coins in their original, untouched condition. Another important step is authentication. If you believe you have a rare or valuable coin, it may be worth sending it to a professional grading service. These organizations evaluate the coin's condition and authenticity, then seal it in a protective case with a grade label. This not only protects the coin but also increases buyer confidence if you ever decide to sell it. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts. Did you know that pennies cost more to make than they are worth? By the late 1970s, and even more so today, the cost of producing a single penny often exceeds 1 cent. Despite this, the penny continues to be minted due to tradition and public demand. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse side was replaced in 2009, marking the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. New designs were introduced to celebrate different stages of his life, making older coins like the 1978 version a piece of a completed chapter in U.S. coin design history. Also, many people overlook pennies completely. They leave them in jars, drop them in drawers, or ignore them on the ground. But collectors see something different. They see history, variation, and the possibility of discovering something rare. This is one of the reasons why collectors love the 1978 no-mint mark penny. It represents a time when coins were still primarily made of copper, when minting was done on a massive scale, and when small variations could slip through unnoticed. It's a reminder that even the most common objects can hold hidden value. There's also a sense of treasure hunting involved. You don't need to spend a lot of money to start collecting pennies. You can search through your own change, old jars, or rolls from the bank. Every coin you examine carries the possibility of being something special. And that's really the beauty of coin collecting. It turns everyday objects into stories. A simple penny becomes a connection to history, economics, and craftsmanship, so the next time you see a 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Examine its details. Think about where it has been, how many hands it has passed through, and what it represents, because sometimes the most ordinary coins are the ones that surprise us the most. And who knows, the next time you check your pocket change, you might just find a small copper coin that's worth a whole lot more than 1 cent. Welcome back. What if the small copper penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now could be worth far more than just 1 cent? Not thousands, not millions, but enough to make you stop, look twice, and realize you've been overlooking something special all along. Today, we're diving into the story of the 1979 D. Lincoln penny, a coin that seems ordinary at first glance but hides details that collectors pay close attention to. The 1979 D. Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in 1979 at the Denver Mint. That small D mint mark, found just below the date on the front of the coin, tells us exactly where it was made. At the time, pennies were still a common part of everyday life in America. They passed through hands at grocery stores, gas stations, and vending machines, rarely earning a second thought. But today, coins like this are being rediscovered by collectors who understand their hidden value. To understand this coin, we have to go back to the late 1970s. America was going through a period of economic change. Inflation was rising, and the cost of producing coins was becoming a real concern. The Lincoln penny, first introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln, had already become one of the most recognized coins in U.S. history. By 1979, the design had remained mostly unchanged for decades, with Lincoln's portrait on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The 1979 D penny was struck in huge numbers. In fact, the Denver Mint produced billions of these coins that year. Because of this, many people assume that all 1979 D pennies are worthless beyond their face value. And for most coins, that's true. But here's where things get interesting. Within those billions of coins, there are small differences, rare conditions, and tiny mistakes that can turn an ordinary penny into something collectors are willing to pay for. Let's talk about what makes this coin unique. The 1979 D penny is made primarily of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc. It has a smooth edge, a weight of about 3.11 grams, and a diameter of 19 millimeters. On the front, you'll see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln, along with the words, "In God We Trust" above, "Liberty" to the left, and the date with the D mint mark to the right. On the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly in the center. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. This level of detail is one of the reasons collectors admire these coins. But the real story begins when we look at errors and variations. During the minting process, coins are produced at high speed, and mistakes can happen. Some 1979 pennies show what collectors call double die errors. This means that certain parts of the design, like the lettering or numbers, appear slightly doubled. These errors can be subtle, but when they are clear, they can significantly increase the coin's value. Another type of error is the off-center strike, where the design is not properly aligned, leaving part of the coin blank. There are also coins with die cracks, where lines appear across the surface due to wear in the minting equipment. While these might sound like flaws, collectors often see them as unique features that make each coin one of a kind. Condition is another major factor. A 1979 penny that has been heavily used, scratched, or worn down will usually be worth only 1 cent. But a coin that has been preserved in near-perfect condition, what collectors call uncirculated, can be worth much more. Coins graded at the highest levels with sharp details and a bright original shine are especially desirable. Now let's talk about real value. Most 1979 pennies in average condition sell for just a few cents, maybe up to $1 if they're in decent shape. But when you move into higher grades, the numbers start to change. A well-preserved, uncirculated coin can sell for several dollars, sometimes even more depending on its quality. Error coins are where things get exciting. A 1979 penny with a strong double die error or a noticeable off-center strike can sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars. In rare cases, coins with multiple errors or exceptional condition have reached even higher prices in auctions and private sales. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist, and that's what keeps collectors searching. So how can you tell if your 1979 penny is valuable? Start by checking the mint mark. Look just below the date on the front of the coin for the small d. Then examine the coin closely under good lighting. Look for unusual features like doubling in the letters or numbers, misalignment, or cracks in the design. Next, consider the condition. Is the coin shiny, with clear details and no major scratches? Or is it worn and faded? The better the condition, the higher the potential value. If you think you might have something special, you can compare it with images online or have it evaluated by a professional coin grading service. It's also important to watch out for fakes. While it's rare for someone to fake a common coin like the 1979 penny, it does happen, especially when it comes to error coins. Some people try to create artificial doubling or damage to make a coin look more valuable than it really is. A genuine error will have a natural appearance, with smooth and consistent features, while a fake often looks uneven or forced. Here's a surprising detail. Even though billions of 1979 pennies were made, finding one in perfect condition today is not easy. Most of these coins were used in everyday transactions, meaning they were exposed to wear and tear over time. That's why high-grade examples are much harder to find and more valuable. Another fun fact is that the Lincoln Memorial design, seen on the back of the 1979 penny, was used from 1959 to 2008. That means this coin is part of a long-running design era in American coinage. Collectors often enjoy building complete sets of Lincoln pennies from different years, and the 1979 is an essential piece of that collection. Collectors love this coin not because it is extremely rare, but because it represents something bigger. It's a reminder that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. A tiny mint mark, a slight doubling in the letters, or an untouched surface can transform a simple penny into a collectible item. There's also a sense of discovery that comes with coins like this. You don't need to be a professional collector to start searching. You can check your spare change, old jars, or coin rolls from the bank. Every time you look at a coin, there's a chance you might find something unusual. And that's what makes the 1979 Lincoln penny so fascinating. It's not just about the money. It's about the story behind the coin, the history it carries, and the possibility that something ordinary can become extraordinary. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it. Take a closer look. Check the date, find the mint mark, and see if there's anything unusual about it. Because hidden among billions of coins, there could be one that stands out. And who knows, the next valuable find might already be in your hands, waiting to be discovered. What if the penny sitting in your pocket right now is quietly worth far more than 1 cent? Not because it looks special, not because it shines differently, but because of something that isn't there at all. Today, we're diving into the story of the 1984 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that seems ordinary at first glance, yet holds details that continue to spark curiosity among collectors. The 1984 Lincoln penny is a small copper-colored coin most people would overlook. It features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, just like millions of other pennies made in the late 20th century. But when you hear the phrase "no mint mark," it can instantly raise questions. Is it rare? Is it valuable? Or is it just another common coin? To understand this coin, we have to go back to 1984, a time when pennies were still widely used in everyday transactions. That year, the United States Mint produced billions of Lincoln cents across different facilities. The majority were struck in Philadelphia and Denver, with San Francisco producing proof coins for collectors. Now here's the key detail. In 1984, pennies made in Philadelphia did not carry a mint mark. So a no mint mark penny from 1984 simply means it was produced in Philadelphia. At first, that might sound disappointing. After all, if millions or even billions were made, how could it be valuable? But the story doesn't end there, because even within common coins, there are variations, errors, and subtle differences that can turn an ordinary penny into something collectors actively search for. The 1984 Lincoln penny was part of a major transition era in U.S. coinage. Just 2 years earlier, in 1982, the composition of the penny had changed. Instead of being made mostly of copper, new pennies were struck using a zinc core with a thin copper coating. By 1984, this new composition was standard. That means your 1984 penny is primarily zinc, even though it looks like copper. The design itself remained classic and recognizable. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's profile, first introduced in 1909 to celebrate his 100th birthday. This design was created by Victor David Brenner and became one of the longest-running designs in American coin history. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly, a design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. But here's where things get interesting. Within the 1984 no mint mark pennies, there is a well-known variety that has captured the attention of collectors. It's called the doubled ear error. This is not something you'll notice immediately unless you know where to look. On some coins, Lincoln's ear appears to have a clear doubling effect, almost like a shadow or a second outline. This happens due to a misalignment during the die creation process, and it creates a distinct visual difference. Coins with this doubled ear error can be significantly more valuable than standard versions. While a typical 1984 no mint mark penny in circulated condition is worth only its face value, or maybe a few cents at most, a doubled ear variety in good condition can sell for hundreds of dollars. In higher grades, especially those that are well preserved and uncirculated, values can climb even higher. There have been auction records and private sales where these error coins have reached impressive prices. Some examples in top condition have sold for several $100s, and in rare cases, even more depending on the clarity of the doubling and overall condition of the coin. This is what makes the 1984 penny so fascinating. Most are common, but a few are truly special. So how can you tell if you have one of these valuable coins? First, look at the front of the penny, specifically Lincoln's ear. You may need a magnifying glass or even a simple coin loop to see the details clearly. If you notice a strong doubling effect, where the ear looks thicker or duplicated, you might be looking at the doubled ear variety. Next, check the overall condition of the coin. Coins that have been heavily circulated, scratched, or worn down will naturally be worth less than those that are clean and well preserved. Collectors often grade coins on a scale, and even small differences in condition can have a big impact on value. It's also important to understand that not every blurry or worn ear is a doubled ear error. Sometimes, damage or wear can create illusions that look like doubling. That's why experienced collectors compare their coins to verified examples or consult professional grading services to confirm authenticity. Another detail to look at is the weight of the coin. Since 1984 pennies are made mostly of zinc, they typically weigh about 2.5 grams. If your coin weighs significantly more or less, it could indicate something unusual. Although this is less common for this particular year, there's also the question of fakes. While counterfeit pennies are not extremely common, valuable error coins can sometimes be altered or misrepresented. That's why it's always a good idea to rely on trusted sources, compare with known examples, and consider professional grading if you believe you have something special. Now here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the 1984 penny is considered modern, it still carries a piece of history that connects back to the early 1900s. The Lincoln cent was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person, breaking away from the tradition of symbolic figures like Lady Liberty. That alone gives every Lincoln penny a unique place in American coinage. Another interesting detail is how many of these coins are still in circulation today. Unlike older rare coins that have disappeared into collections, the 1984 penny can still show up in pocket change. That means the possibility of finding a valuable error coin isn't just a dream. It's something that could happen during your next trip to the store. Collectors are drawn to the 1984 no-mint mark penny for a simple reason. It represents the thrill of discovery. It's not about owning something obviously rare or expensive. It's about finding value in something that most people ignore. That idea, that a small overlooked detail can turn an everyday object into a collectible, is what keeps people searching. There's also a sense of accessibility. You don't need a huge budget to start looking for coins like this. You don't need special connections or rare opportunities. All you need is patience, curiosity, and a willingness to look closely at the coins you already have. Over the years, stories have surfaced of people discovering valuable pennies in jars, drawers, or even loose change. While not every story leads to a big payday, the excitement of the possibility is real. And the 1984 doubled ear penny is one of those coins that keeps that excitement alive. As you explore your own coins, remember that knowledge is your greatest tool. The more you understand about what to look for, the better your chances of spotting something unusual. And even if you don't find a high-value error, you'll gain a deeper appreciation for the history and craftsmanship behind each coin. In the end, the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a reminder that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in the smallest details, waiting for someone to notice. So the next time you come across a penny, take a closer look. Because you never know. That simple coin in your hand might just have a story worth far more than 1 cent. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a simple penny, something most people ignore every day. But what if that small coin held a story, and possibly more value than you ever expected? Today we're talking about the 1986 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and features the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln. But like many coins in American history, the real story lies beneath the surface. The 1986 Lincoln penny is part of a long-running series that began in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1986, this coin had already been in circulation for over 75 years, becoming one of the most recognized coins in the United States. That year, millions upon millions of pennies were produced to meet everyday demand. These coins were minted primarily in 2 locations, Philadelphia and Denver. Here's where it gets interesting. Coins minted in Philadelphia during that time typically had no mint mark at all. So when you see a 1986 penny without a mint mark, it means it was produced in Philadelphia. That might sound common, and in many ways it is. But not all of these coins are equal. To understand why, we need to look at what was happening during that period. In the early 1980s, the U.S. Mint made a major change to the composition of pennies. Before 1982, pennies were mostly made of copper. But due to rising copper prices, the mint switched to a new composition, a zinc core with a thin copper coating. By 1986, all Lincoln pennies were made using this newer method. This change created subtle differences in weight, sound, and even how the coins aged over time. The 1986 no mint mark penny is made of 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper, which makes it lighter than older pennies. It weighs about 2.5 grams, compared to the heavier 3.1 grams of earlier copper coins. Now let's talk about design. The front of the coin, known as the obverse, features Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head, you'll see the words, "In God We Trust." To the left is the word liberty, and to the right is the year 1986, Since there's no mint mark, the area below the date is blanked on the back, or reverse. You'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. It's one of those small details that many people never notice, even after years of handling these coins. So what makes a 1986 no-mint mark penny valuable? After all, billions were produced. The answer lies in condition, rarity within condition, and errors. Most of these pennies are only worth their face value, especially if they've been heavily circulated. But if you find one in uncirculated condition, meaning it has never really been used and still has its original shine, the value can increase significantly. Collectors pay close attention to grading. A coin graded MS65 or higher, which means it's in near-perfect condition, can be worth several dollars, sometimes even more depending on demand. But coins graded MS67 or higher are extremely rare. These are coins that look almost flawless under magnification, with sharp details and no visible wear. In some cases, a 1986 no-mint mark penny in top condition has sold for hundreds of dollars. That might sound surprising for such a common coin, but in the world of collecting, perfection is rare. Then there are error coins, and this is where things get even more exciting. Error coins are mistakes made during the minting process. These can include double dies, off-center strikes, or even issues with the metal composition. For example, a double die error occurs when the design is stamped onto the coin more than once, slightly misaligned. This can create a noticeable doubling effect on letters or numbers. If you find a 1986 penny with clear doubling, it could be worth far more than a regular coin. Another type of error is an off-center strike, where the coin design is not properly aligned, leaving part of the coin blank. These errors are visually striking and often highly collectible. There are also rare cases where planchet errors occur. A planchet is the blank metal disc used to make a coin. If something goes wrong before the design is stamped, it can create unusual textures or shapes. Collectors love these imperfections because they make each coin unique. Instead of being one of billions, an error coin might be one of only a few known examples. Now let's talk about real-world value. While most 1986 no-mint mark pennies are worth just 1 cent, uncirculated examples can sell for anywhere between $1 to $10. Higher-grade coins, especially those professionally graded, can reach $50 or more. And rare error coins? Those can climb into the hundreds, depending on the type and severity of the error. There have been auction listings where nearly perfect specimens have surprised sellers with unexpectedly high final bids. It all comes down to condition, rarity, and collector interest. So how can you tell if your 1986 penny is worth more than face value? First, check the mint mark. If there is no mint mark, you're looking at a Philadelphia coin. That's your starting point. Next, examine the condition. Look for shine, also known as luster. A valuable coin will often have a bright, almost reflective surface. Check for scratches, discoloration, or wear, especially on Lincoln's face and the high points of the design. Then use a magnifying glass to look for errors. Pay close attention to the date and lettering. Any signs of doubling, unusual spacing, or misalignment could indicate an error. Weight can also help. A standard 1986 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly different, it might be worth investigating further. If you believe you have a rare or valuable coin, consider having it graded by a professional service. This not only confirms its authenticity but also gives it a certified grade, which can greatly increase its market value. Here's a fun fact. Even though the 1986 penny is made mostly of zinc, its copper coating can wear away over time, revealing the dull gray metal underneath. This is why some older pennies look patchy or discolored. It's a reminder that even coins have a lifespan. Another interesting detail is how many of these coins are still out there. Because they were produced in such large numbers, it's very possible that valuable examples are still hiding in jars, drawers, or even your loose change. That's part of what makes coin collecting so exciting. You never know what you might find. A simple penny could turn out to be a small piece of history with a story to tell. Collectors love the 1986 no-mint mark penny not because it's rare in general, but because it represents a moment in time. It's part of the transition to modern coin production, using new materials and techniques. It also shows how even everyday objects can become valuable under the right conditions, that there's also a sense of nostalgia. For many people, this coin brings back memories of childhood, of counting change, or saving pennies in a jar. It connects the past to the present in a very real way. And perhaps the most fascinating part is this: the value of a coin isn't just about metal or age. It's about rarity, condition, and the story behind it. Even a coin made in the millions can become special if it stands out from the rest, so the next time you come across a 1986 penny with no mint mark, don't just toss it aside. Take a closer look. Examine the details. Check the condition. You might discover something unexpected. Because in the world of coin collecting, sometimes the smallest things hold the biggest surprises. And who knows, the next valuable coin might already be in your pocket, waiting for you to notice it. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering that this tiny copper coin might be more interesting than it looks. Not because it's gold, not because it's ancient, but because of something that's missing. No mint mark. Just a quiet detail that most people ignore, yet collectors look for with sharp eyes. Today we're talking about the 1991 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have seen, but very few have truly understood. At first glance, the 1991 penny looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has been part of American coinage since 1909. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of history and unity. It's a coin that passed through countless hands, bought candy, paid for newspapers, and disappeared into jars and drawers across the country. But here's where things get interesting. Some of these pennies don't have a mint mark, and that small missing letter raises a big question. Is it rare, or is it just common and misunderstood? To understand that, we need to go back to 1991. This was a time before digital payments, when coins were still heavily used in daily life. The United States Mint produced billions of pennies that year to keep up with demand. These coins were made at different mint facilities, mainly Philadelphia and Denver. Coins struck in Denver carry a small D mint mark. Coins from Philadelphia, however, traditionally did not carry any mint mark at all. So when you see a 1991 penny with no mint mark, it usually means it was made in Philadelphia. That might sound simple, but for collectors, this detail is the starting point of a deeper story. The 1991 penny is part of the Lincoln Memorial series, which ran from 1959 to 2008. By this time, the composition of the penny had already changed. Before 1982, pennies were mostly made of copper. But due to rising metal costs, the mint switched to a zinc core with a thin copper coating, so the 1991 penny is made mostly of zinc, with just a small layer of copper on the outside. It weighs about 2.5 grams and has a smooth edge. To the average person, it feels like any other modern penny. But collectors often pay attention to even the smallest differences, including weight, color, and wear. Now let's talk about what really matters. Is the 1991 no mint mark penny rare? The honest answer is no, not in the traditional sense. Millions upon millions of these coins were produced in Philadelphia without a mint mark. That means most of them are still very common today. You can find them in circulation, in old jars, or even in your spare change. But that doesn't mean all of them are worthless. Value in coin collecting often comes from condition and errors. A regular 1991 penny in worn condition might only be worth 1 or 2 cents. But if you find one in near-perfect condition, what collectors call uncirculated, the value can rise significantly. Coins that have never been used, with sharp details and original shine, are much harder to find than people think. Over time, most pennies get scratched, faded, or damaged. So a 1991 penny that looks almost brand new can attract serious attention from collectors. There's also another factor that can turn an ordinary coin into something special: errors. Minting errors happen when something goes wrong during the production process. These mistakes are not supposed to happen, which is exactly why collectors love them. For the 1991 penny, some known errors include double die errors, where the design appears slightly doubled, and off-center strikes, where the image is not perfectly aligned on the coin. There are also coins with weak strikes or unusual surfaces. One of the most talked about varieties is the double die obverse. On these coins, you might notice slight doubling in the lettering, especially around the words liberty or in God we trust. It's not always easy to see, but with careful inspection it becomes clear coins with these kinds of errors can sell for much higher prices, sometimes reaching tens or even hundreds of dollars depending on the condition and visibility of the error. There have been auction examples where high-grade 1991 pennies, especially those graded by professional services, have sold for impressive amounts. A perfect or near-perfect coin, graded at the highest levels, can sometimes reach over $100. Error coins can go even higher depending on rarity and demand. But here's the key point. Not every 1991 penny without a mint mark is valuable. In fact, most are still very common. The value comes from the details that most people overlook. So how can you tell if your coin is special? Start by checking the condition. Look at the surface of the coin. Is it shiny or dull? Are the details sharp or worn down? A coin with clear lines in Lincoln's hair and strong details on the memorial is a good sign. Next, examine the coin closely for errors. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Look at the letters and numbers. Do they appear doubled or slightly blurred? Check if the design is centered. Even small differences can matter. Also, pay attention to the color. Some pennies develop unusual tones over time, ranging from bright red to deep brown. Collectors often prefer coins with original red color, especially if they are well preserved. Another important step is weighing the coin. While most 1991 pennies should weigh around 2.5 grams, any significant difference could indicate something unusual. It's rare, but sometimes coins are struck on the wrong type of metal. Of course, if you believe you've found something valuable, it's always a good idea to have it checked by a professional coin grading service. They can confirm authenticity, condition, and potential value. Now here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the 1991 no-mint mark penny is common, it's still part of a larger collecting journey. Many collectors enjoy building complete sets of Lincoln pennies, and every year matters. That means even a simple coin like this has a place in history. It represents a specific moment in time, a year when billions of coins were produced to keep the economy moving, to pass through stores, pockets, and hands, carrying stories that we'll never fully know. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln memorial on the back of the coin actually shows a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside. It's incredibly small, but if you look closely, you can see it. It's one of the few coins where the same person appears on both sides. Collectors love these kinds of details. They turn an ordinary object into something meaningful. So why do collectors still care about the 1991 penny today? Because coin collecting is not just about money. It's about discovery. It's about looking at something familiar and asking a deeper question. What makes this different? What makes it special? For some, it's the thrill of finding a rare error. For others, it's the satisfaction of completing a collection. And for many, it's simply the connection to history. The 1991 no-mint mark penny may not be rare in large numbers, but it teaches an important lesson. Welcome back. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket change, the kind most people ignore, only to discover it could be worth far more than 1 cent. What if a coin from 1995, something still relatively modern, held hidden value that collectors quietly search for every day? Today, we're talking about the 1995 D-Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that might not look special at first glance, but has a story, unique features, and even rare variations that can surprise you. The 1995 D Lincoln penny was produced at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small D mint mark on the front of the coin, just below the date. This coin is part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1995, this design had already become one of the most recognized coins in American history, used daily by millions of people. Back in 1995, the United States was going through a time of economic stability and technological growth. Coins like this penny were made in massive numbers to keep up with everyday transactions. In fact, the Denver Mint produced over 7 billion pennies that year. That's a huge number, which means most 1995 D pennies you find today are very common and worth only face value. But here's where things start to get interesting. Even in years when billions of coins are made, small mistakes can happen during production. These mistakes, known as mint errors, are what turn ordinary coins into valuable collectibles. And the 1995 Lincoln penny is famous for one particular type of error that has caught the attention of collectors worldwide. While the most famous error that year came from the Philadelphia Mint, known as the 1995 double die obverse, some collectors also look closely at Denver minted coins for minor doubling, die cracks, off-center strikes, and other subtle variations. These are not always easy to spot, but when they are clear and confirmed, they can significantly increase a coin's value. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. The 1995 D Lincoln penny is made primarily of zinc, with a thin copper coating. This composition was introduced in 1982 to reduce production costs, replacing the older solid copper pennies. The coin weighs about 2.5 grams and has a smooth edge on the front, or obverse. You'll see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and to the right is the date, 1995, with the small D mint mark below it. The phrase "In God We Trust" appears along the top edge. On the back, or reverse, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was used from 1959 until 2008. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, which is a detail many people never noticed. So what makes a 1995 D penny valuable? Condition plays a huge role. Coins that have never been used in circulation, known as uncirculated or mint state coins, are worth more than worn ones. A shiny, flawless 1995 D penny with strong details and no scratches can sell for several dollars, sometimes even higher if graded by a professional service. But the real excitement comes from error coins. For example, a 1995 D penny with noticeable doubling in the letters or numbers can attract collector interest. A coin with a misaligned strike where the design is off-center can also be valuable. Even small die cracks, which appear as raised lines on the coin, can make a difference depending on their size and visibility. There have been cases where collectors found 1995 pennies with unusual features and sold them for hundreds of dollars. While most 1995 D pennies won't reach those prices, the possibility keeps collectors searching. Now you might be wondering, how can you tell if your coin is real or if it has a valuable error? First, check the mint mark. A genuine 1995 D penny will have a clearly defined D below the date. It should not look added or altered. If the mint mark appears unusual, it's worth taking a closer look, but be cautious, as altered coins do exist. Next, examine the details under good lighting. Look closely at the date, the word Liberty, and Lincoln's features. If you see doubling that looks like a shadow or a second image slightly offset, it could be a sign of a double die or machine doubling. True double die errors are more valuable, but they are also less common. Weight is another clue. A standard 1995 D penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier or lighter, it might be something unusual or possibly damaged. For serious collectors, using a magnifying glass or a coin microscope can reveal details that are invisible to the naked eye. And if you believe you've found something special, sending the coin to a professional grading service can confirm its authenticity and value. Here's something many people don't realize. Even though the 1995 D penny is considered modern, it's now over 30 years old. That means fewer coins remain in perfect condition, especially since most were heavily used in everyday transactions. Over time, this natural wear reduces the number of high-quality examples available, which slowly increases their value. Another interesting fact is that coin collecting often starts with coins like this. Many collectors begin by searching through pocket change, looking for dates, mint marks, and small differences. The 1995 D penny is a perfect example of a coin that teaches you how to look closely and pay attention to detail. Collectors also enjoy the challenge. With billions of coins produced, finding one with a unique error feels like discovering hidden treasure. It turns an ordinary object into something meaningful and valuable. So why do collectors still care about the 1995 D Lincoln penny today? It represents a balance between common and rare. On one hand, it's easy to find, making it accessible to beginners. On the other hand, the possibility of errors and high-grade examples keeps experienced collectors interested. It also connects the past to the present. This coin was part of everyday life in the mid-1990s, passing through countless hands, stores, and cities. Each coin has its own journey, even if we don't know the details. And perhaps the most exciting part is this. There could still be valuable 1995 pennies out there, sitting unnoticed in jars, drawers, or even your own pocket change. Most people don't take the time to look closely, which means opportunities are often missed. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it too quickly. Take a moment, check the date, look for the mint mark, and examine the details. You never know what you might find. Because sometimes, the smallest coins carry the biggest surprises.